Hello, and welcome back to biology. Today, we want to talk a little bit about fertilization and what that means and what happens right after that. So, we know that we have sperm and we have egg, right? And they have to fuse together to form the offspring. And here's another nice picture there. You can see here the sperm, and then this, of course, is the surface of the egg. And cool stuff, right? The sperm will actually, and only one can get through. There's a blocking mechanism that prevents multiple sperm from going into the egg, and that is really important because this part right here has, well, actually in the further end, but that's not important. But the sperm itself has a set of chromosomes, right? It's got N chromosomes, depending on what type of species we're talking about. If you had more than one sperm, you would have more than one set. And so instead of having 2N in your zygote, like you should have for any normal cell, maybe you have 3N or 4N or 5N or 6N, right? And that would be bad. So once that first sperm that gets through this outer layer hits a certain point, the layer blocks, right? And it doesn't allow any other sperm through. And then you get this like pronucleus that'll fuse together, and then you'll have this wonderful little zygote. And the zygote is the fertilized egg. So here's your first question. The egg and the sperm fuse to form the zygote, with each providing the cell components for the offspring. True or false? Well, let's just go back to this picture. Sperm, egg, egg, right? It is the egg that provides all of the organelles, the plasma membrane, the nuclear membrane, the cytoplasm, the cytoskeleton, and it also includes RNA, maternal RNA, that will allow for the developmental process to occur. Eventually, that maternal RNA will degrade and the zygote will start using its own genes, right? The offspring will start using its own genes. But at first, the mother even provides genes, right? Essentially, to be translated into proteins to make everything happen. And that's kind of cool, actually. But the sperm contributes only the other half of the chromosome set. Okay, so embryonic development. Development is simply these steps that are occurring to transform a zygote into a multicellular embryo, and we're going to talk about multicellularity a little bit later on, not today. An embryo is the earliest stage of development for a multicellular organism. At a certain point, it becomes a fetus, right? But what we're talking about is embryonic development. And remember that you've got mitosis occurring after fertilization, right? Meiosis makes the egg and the sperm, but all of the other cell divisions are going to be meiosis. Now, the cells are going to grow, and the cells are going to differentiate. And differentiation is one of the things we're focusing on today. So you've got your little fertilized egg here. It's going to start dividing. Now, at first, it's actually going to stay the same size. It's going to be trapped in this membrane right here. The zona pellucida. But anyway, it's going to be in that. And so you'll see that the dividing cells actually just get smaller and smaller and smaller, and they line up and form a ring. This part is called the blastula, and there's a cavity here. And this cavity actually turns out to be really, really important. And we'll talk about that why when we talk about multicellularity and multicellular organisms. Now, this process is called cleavage. When you have that first division, that's cleavage. And I just wanted to show you a little comparison of what things end up looking like. In frogs, you get to that last stage with the cavity in the middle, and that's a blastula. In mammals, it's called a blastocyst, and there's kind of a division here, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on, what that means. But this just gives you an idea of how things develop differently. Now, these are all stem cells at this point. Stem cells are undifferentiated cells, and there are two big kinds. There are adult stem cells, and those are found in, it doesn't have to be adults, right? These are after differentiation, after organs have specialized and all this good stuff. They're going to be found in certain organs and tissues like bone marrow, which is going to be producing your red blood cells, your white blood cells, and your platelets, all that good stuff. Skin, right, has to be regenerated. Anything that's going to be regenerated or regrown is going to come from a niche of adult stem cells. They are very specific. A stem cell, hematopoietic stem cell, which is the one in bone marrow, can't make and it can't skin cells. It can only make those blood cells. Okay. Now, embryonic stem cells are the cells from embryos, and they can make most of the kinds of cells. Right? Now, the cool thing about stem cells is that we can manipulate them ourselves later. And so there's a lot of medical possibilities for stem cells, including regrowing amputated limbs, reconnecting severed spines, right? Growing eyes that can see for people who are blind. I mean, all kinds of stuff, right? So which type of stem cell has the most medical potential? Adult stem cells, embryonic stem cells, or both are equally usable? Well, it's embryonic stem cells that have the most medical potential because remember, adult stem cells are further along in the differentiation process, and so they're very limited, whereas embryonic stem cells are not, right? And so stem cells have the ability to divide and renew themselves, to remain in undifferentiated form, and to develop a variety of specialized cells. Okay, so you have your stem cell. You can either get 2 new stem cells, or you can get 1 new stem cell and a specialized cell, and that's pretty cool. Now, differentiation is the process by which stem or unspecialized cells develop into specialized cells. Now, every set has a full set of, every cell has a full set of identical DNA, okay? But specialized cells use only specific genes. So you can imagine all of the DNA in your cells like a book, okay? But certain cells read only certain chapters or even certain parts of chapters. Okay, and then the rest of it just gets completely ignored. So we start out with our zygote, and the zygote is what we call totipotent because it can create the cells, well, it can divide into not just the embryonic cells, but it can also form things like the placenta, okay, and stuff like that. So these extra embryonic types of membranes and tissues. Okay, that's what totipotent means. So what we're talking about right in here is the potency of a stem cell, and the potency is how many things it can change into, basically. Okay, now once we form the blastocyst, it's going to hatch out of its little membrane. The blastocyst is filled with pluripotent cells. Okay, and pluripotent cells can give rise to almost all of the tissues of an organism. Okay, they can't do any of the extra embryonic tissues, okay, but they can pretty much do all the rest of everything. So your pluripotent cell can become an organism, right? Now, they're going to start differentiating into multipotent cells. These cells can give rise to certain groups of cells, right, like the blood stem cells or nerve stem cells, things like that. And then here's just another kind of view of that, except it picks up at multipotent cells, which is kind of where we left off a minute ago. So these were the hematopoietic stem cells that I talked about, the multipotent blood cells. So they can divide into 2 different kinds of progenitor cells, okay? And then those progenitor cells divide into some other progenitor cells. So you've got multipotent. These are also multipotent, by the way, because they can become more than one. And then you have your lineage committed cells. Okay, so these are the ones that are going to produce the actual specialized cells. Some of them are unipotent, right? Like B cell progenitor cells only make B cells. Some of them are still multipotent, right? Like all the rest of these guys. The T cell and natural killer cell progenitor cells make natural killer cells and T cells. These are all immune cells, by the way. It's very exciting. And then these are all, this is also part of the immune cell. All of these guys. And then these guys are blood cells. Well, these are platelets, but they're all, you get the point. Anyway, all right, so how do cells know what to become? Well, you have this cleavage, right, and this formation of the blastula, which is the first major phase of embryonic development. And then the cell is going to undergo a process called gastrulation. And then it's going to continue to develop further from there. We're going to stop at gastrulation because this is the part that basically, as far as we know, assigns each cell to what it's going to become. So the cells in that blastula actually roll over each other, okay, in this process of gastrulation, and I will show you a video in class. But what you end up with are layers of cells, okay, so as they're forming, and this of course is for human, right? And so you end up with 3 layers, and these layers are called germ layers, right? And the germ layers are just layers of tissue that develop, but their location is really important. You've got the ectoderm, which is the outermost layer. It's going to be the epidermis in the nervous system. Okay, you have the mesoderm, which is going to be the middle layer, and you can see right here, right, the pink, right, is going to be the mesoderm. The ectoderm is blue, and the endoderm is yellow, right? The mesoderm, and that's standard, by the way, ectoderm blue, mesoderm pink, endoderm yellow. That's just the way it is. The middle layer, that mesoderm, is going to develop into the muscular system, the skeletal system, and the urogenital system, so like kidneys, stuff like that. And then the endoderm is the innermost layer, and that becomes your digestive system and your respiratory system. Now, as a side note, you'll notice that I didn't actually talk about any of the reproductive organs. Those form on their own from some primordial germ cells that get separated from everything else, right? So there you go. All right, so what is a germ cell? We've got germ layers, and those are sheets of cells that will specialize into various parts of the body, right? But they're germ cells too, okay? So what is a germ cell? A pathogenic bacterial cell, like germ, a virus, a stem cell that gives rise to other cells, a stem cell that gives rise to gametes, or a specialized cell. So you remember I was talking a minute ago about this whole reproductive system thing, and a germ cell is the cell that gives rise to gametes. And germ cells are really important. I mean, all of the cells are really important, but like somatic cells, which are the other kinds of cells, okay, they don't affect the offspring. So let's say that you have a mutation in a somatic cell. Well, that may give you cancer, right? But it's not going to be passed on to your offspring. But if you have a mutation in a germ cell, then it's going to produce gametes that have that mutation, and that can lead to those traits being passed on. And we'll talk about that more later. All right, so that is the end of this little conversation today. We'll talk more about stem cells and all that good stuff next time. So thanks for listening, and bye.